Gunjan Bagla is Managing Director of Amritt Incorporated, a California-based consulting firm focused on helping American companies succeed in India. His clients include Clorox, Kraft, Grace Foods, Nordic Naturals, Burt's Bees, Paramount Farms, Johnson & Johnson, Hewlett-Packard, Life Products, and many more. Gunjan's work on India's consumer market has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, and he has also written for Happy Magazine about India's personal care market. For his India expertise, Gunjan has appeared in the New York Times, the LA Times, Washington Post, Bloomberg TV, BBC TV, and on Fox Business News. He writes about India for the Huffington Post, and in fact, his article on trade in India was just published yesterday on the Huffington Post, and we would be happy to send you a link if you send us a little email. And he has also been quoted multiple times in Forbes magazine. Gunjan has an MBA from Southern Illinois University and a mechanical engineering degree from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur in India. He was also the president of the Alumni Association of the IITs. So now here's Gunjan.
Thank you, Supriya, and good morning or good afternoon to all of you who have joined in on the phone today. We have a lot of material to cover, and so what I encourage you to do is send me questions. Particularly, I'm going to start by asking if any of you are involved in product development or sourcing in addition to marketing of consumer products. Please do send us a note on the question box so that I can address those portions in the webinar, the slides towards the end, and I will skip over them or gloss over them quickly unless someone on the live session requests for more detail there. So please don't hesitate to do that, and please do send me any questions. So some time ago, we began working with the largest grower of pistachio nuts in the world, a company called Paramount Farms, which is part of Roll International. They grow their pistachios all across the San Joaquin Valley in about 80,000 acres. And they are processing them in Lost Hills, California, and then shipping the pistachios to be sold under their own brand, under other people's brands, under private label for industrial or other types of uses. They're really the dominant force in the American pistachio market and one of the largest players worldwide. Now you look at India, and Indians have enjoyed eating almonds, pistachios, walnuts for centuries. Most of the pistachios in India used to come from Afghanistan, where the supply has been disrupted because of the last decade of war and so on, and from Iran, which is the world's largest grower of pistachios. That's really where pistachios originated from. And so we went into the market saying we will have a premium, high quality, healthy American product where you can be confident that the issue of bacteria or other problems is low. You can be sure that the amount of salt used and the moisture level is far more appropriate and tasty, and that the product is far more predictable. This also implies that the product is premium priced. And we worked with Paramount Farms for about a 6-year period in building their presence in India, all the way from the very first trip that they made to a point where, as you can see on the top left, they have billboards and some limited television advertising as well across India. Pistachios historically were eaten mostly in northern India, and by presenting a very well packaged and marketed product, we have gotten people in southern India to be able to enjoy pistachios as well. They're being sold in thousands of outlets all across the country. The wonderful brand is Paramount's own brand, but they're also selling, as I said, to other distributors and manufacturers who are packaging them and putting their own spices and then selling them under their own brand. If you go to a Costco or a Trader Joe's or your favorite mainstream grocery store, in the grocery section, typically you'll see these big black cartons where the Paramount pistachios are being sold. And the way they're sold in India is a little bit different. I may get into that later on. But it's been one of our great success stories in getting a premium American manufactured and grown product being sold in India. They've done so well in India that they've actually established a roasting plant so that they can turn freshly roasted product with the right kind of configuration right within India. It was the first place worldwide outside the United States where Paramount set up a roasting plant of their own. And that's the picture on the bottom right you see is their first plant. They've since just recently moved it to a bigger plant in the same town uh, that that again was justified by their sales process and their success in India. So some of you on the phone might be thinking, why India? Why should I worry about it right at this point? So the real message there is right from last week, and that's the article I wrote for the Huffington Post. And I'm sorry for the typo here in the word secretary, but Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker, who joined President Obama's cabinet a year ago, made her first trip to India last week. And she was part of the team with Secretary of State John Kerry, but she took two of her very senior people who are responsible for increasing American exports to India. And the goal that they announced is really to increase bilateral trade in India from about 96 or 100 billion dollars today annually to about 500 billion. And this is something I have been predicting in my articles for Huffington Post, Business Week, and other sources for a while. Just to realize the magnitude of this, in around 2002, the total trade between the US and India was only $20 billion. We are talking about a growth from 20 billion to about 500 billion in 5 years. And the Indian economy was not even $1 trillion when, in 2000. So there's been tremendous growth. A lot more growth is expected. And the key thing that I want to emphasize is that the consumer product market is actually leading some of this growth. There are many, many sectors in India that are growing. But if you look at the consumption by Indian consumers, it's growing at double-digit rates. Look at Indian companies. Some of them are growing at 25, 30%. Most are growing at least 12 to 20%. And as a result of this growth, by 2025, India will be among the top 5 consumer markets in the world. Just a few months ago, the World Bank announced that India's GDP now exceeds Japan in purchasing power parity terms. So only the Chinese economy and the American economy are larger in purchasing parity terms. In absolute dollar terms, certainly Germany and some of the European countries and Japan are larger. In terms of how much your money will buy in each country, the power of the Indian market is tremendous. Now the good news is that many companies from America are winning in India today. And the timeliness of this webinar, I think, is very important because some of the changes that have happened in India, there was a historic election in May, and the party that had been in power for the last 10 years was displaced. The opposition party not only came into power, they came into power without having to use a coalition government. So they themselves, the BJP themselves, got more than 50% of the vote. And that hasn't happened in India since 1984. We have now today in India the most business-friendly government that the country has ever seen. And we are seeing this activity with our clients today, that people who had been on the sidelines for the last 4 or 5 years because of some uncertainty from the previous government are all accelerating their plans. They're increasing their investments in India. They're increasing their travel there. They're increasing their marketing budgets. It's important that you realize that waiting is not going to be a good thing at this point. Your decisions this year are going to be key. India's Prime Minister is coming to Washington next month. And while they're talking about strategy and politics and defense, trade is one of the things that really underpins the relationship between the world's 2 largest democracies. There are many, many companies that, as I said, are selling billions of dollars into India, and small companies are doing very well as well. And we'll get into that a little bit. Very briefly about Amritt, I'm not going to read you this slide. We are experts in globalization, and we help Western companies, primarily American companies, to succeed in India. We work across various sectors of activity, such as market access, which is the focus of today's webinar, but we also help people with sourcing and engineering services and technology scouting related to consumer products in India. We've spoken publicly about that in the past, and there's materials I can send you if you're interested in those activities. Our focus today is going to be the marketing of consumer products, of consumer packaged goods. And if anybody is interested in consumer services, we can talk about those as well. So I will quickly talk about the 4 P's of marketing as applied to India. And that's the bulk of the presentation today. If need be, if anybody requests, I can talk about R&D collaboration with India. And some of our clients are finding it worthwhile to source product in India, sometimes for the Indian market, sometimes for all of Asia, and in many cases now, product from India is being sourced for the American or European market as well. So we can do all of those things. And again, I will spend time on those latter 2 topics only if people specifically ask or if we have time left over at the end. Now, 2 things that get missed in all of the media and all the other consultants that talk about India are the factors that I want to hit upon first. When you travel to India, when you talk to Indian consumers and executives, you find across the board a much more favorable attitude towards the United States than you do in most other countries. The results I have on the right side here are from a survey that's a little bit dated from its source in 2008, but the Pew Center has conducted similar studies more recently, and similar results show up where people in India have a more favorable view of the United States than most of the BRIC countries, as you can see here. Russia figures down here at 23%, and this was well before the problems in Ukraine. China is down at 34%. Brazil is about 36%. India, however, sits right up there with very close to the Americans' own view of India, of themselves, I mean. And so you're looking at about 72% of Indians having a positive view to the U.S. The Pew Center conducted a different kind of study about 3 years ago, and they concluded that only 10% of Indians had a negative view of the United States. And my message here is that you can leverage this goodwill into revenue if you listen carefully to what the Indian consumer is saying. I illustrate this on the left side with some pictures that I took. The top picture is a billboard in the city of Chennai in South India, advertising the services of a cell phone company. And you can see inside the globe, they've got the Hollywood sign, typical American school bus, the Empire State Building, the Golden Gate Bridge, and the Statue of Liberty. The ad, of course, is talking about making long-distance calls, but the important thing to note is that the average Indian recognizes these American symbols right away. And you might say, oh, of course, that's true. But put yourself in the reverse situation. How many symbols outside of the Taj Mahal about India can you recognize at a moment's notice? Okay? The point I'm making is that the average Indian is very much aware of what is happening in the U.S. at the high level, and they value the American brands, the American symbolism, the American way of life. At the bottom, I have a picture of a billboard put up by a company called Amul, and I won't get into Amul in detail right now, but this was a few months ago when Vice President Joe Biden visited India, and the language on the billboard is really Hindi written in English, but you can see that I've got the arrows pointing to where they use the word Joe and the word Biden, and it's a semi-funny kind of message that Amul is famous for putting up on on billboards across the country. They change these every 2 weeks, so they're always very topical and timely. The point is that Indians love the USA. The general data about India is also very compelling, and I won't bore you with a lot of data in today's presentation, but this is a country which has over 1 billion people. More important is the fact that half of them are under 25 years old, and the country is very diverse. You've got 23 official languages and 6 large urban areas listed at the bottom of the slide, Mumbai being the largest, Delhi, which is the national capital, being the second, and then there are 3 large cities in India. Most Americans have heard of Bangalore, but there's also Chennai, which used to be called Madras, and Hyderabad, which was one of the cities that President Bush visited on his very first trip to India back in 2006, I think. There's a lot of pharmaceutical and technical activity in Hyderabad. Let me move on. Supriya, this might be a good time to conduct the first of our polls, find out a
Sure,
little bit
Gunjan. I'll
about the
go ahead and
audience.
do that. And I also would like to encourage the audience to please send us any questions you might have. This is a great time to do so. Thank you. The poll is up. Please go ahead and give us your responses.
Okay, so what I see here is that most of you are still very early stage considering the idea of India, and the rest of you have limited presence in India with plans to grow. Sometimes we get people who've been in India 8, 10 years and are looking at a reboot or a significant expansion. It's always good to get this perspective, and I will focus my remarks for the rest of the webinar on, on the people who are not so familiar with India. If you look at American companies in India or foreign companies in India, you'll see how they rank. This is actually a list of the largest consumer companies as they operate in India. And you'll see that the gorilla in the room is Unilever with over $4 billion of sales, accounting for about 15% of Unilever's global value. So this is a crucial market for them. And Nestle out of Switzerland has also been very big in India. Look at the rest of the list and you'll now find many companies that you may not be familiar with. Britannia, which is an Indian company, uh, Dabur, which is based in New Delhi and is typically known for producing very traditional Ayurvedic-based products. Marico, which started out as essentially a coconut oil company from Kerala, but now has a fairly wide range of product offerings and does quite a bit of its own internal R&D. Its current CEO is one of India's billionaires. And then we see our first American company on the list, Colgate, which has been in India for quite a while, but their revenues are in India are only about $500 million. Um, the point I want you to take away from this is that the leaders are typically today European-based companies that have had a long legacy in India. The management of these companies, the way they function is very much Indian today. Now, Unilever for a while had a South African South African born CEO running the company, but it wasn't because he was there to teach the Indians how to run. He was actually there to learn how Lever does business in India, so that when he made the next move to European headquarters, he had a good understanding of one of the key markets. And that's the kind of thing we also see with a company like Nestle that has been in India for a while. As American companies become more established, and many of them have become so, are starting to do so already, you will find, I think if I do this chart 5 years from now, you'll find a lot more American companies figuring on the list because of some of the reasons I've given earlier. Now, what is fueling this growth in India? It's not just the growth of the economy. Of course, that's important. Per capita income in India is rising. India is still a very poor country, but as more and more people have enough income that they can think about things other than the basic necessities, they start to spend more on packaged consumer goods, whether it's food, whether it's personal care, whether it's home care. The second thing that's happening is that India is still largely a rural country, but is transforming to become an urban country. Over 200 million people are moving to cities over the next 3 to 4 years now. The latest budget of the Indian government makes a commitment to helping create 100 new cities that will be as what they call smart cities, meaning they'll be digitally enabled, they'll have modern infrastructure and so on. But for most of you on the phone, however, the market will be still the current cities that I talked about, the 6 large metro areas, and maybe some others, depending on the product range. Those cities are also growing by leaps and bounds. Delhi and Mumbai are more than 20 million people each, so they are the size of many countries and bigger than many American states. India is a young country. I talked about that already. And I think the last point that often gets missed is that as India has transformed over the last 20 years, modern media has become a strong force. This is not Hollywood media. This is largely Indian media. India produces more movies than any country in the world, and a tremendous number of television shows. And electronic media is now guiding the choices of young people. Certainly social media is also popular among the young people. But I would say in terms of brand choices, a lot of that is being driven by what they see the, cricket players and the movie stars wearing inside of movies and their public appearances. Western media is also growing in India. Unlike China, India does not censor Western media, so you can see pretty much everything on Google. You can get most Western movies in India, although they are not as popular as they might be in Europe, but they're certainly available in all the major cities. There's no limit that the Indian government places on the number of movies that can be imported, unlike China. So those really are the four factors that we find are influencing the growth of the consumer product market, whether it's personal care, whether it's food, whether it's home care products or pet care or auto care. I talked about Colgate-Palmolive. They've been in India for a while, but here's a recent example of their nimbleness. They decided that the threat from the Indian companies such as Dabur and Godrej and others was strong, and so they started segmenting the market more carefully. And here's an example where they launched a toothpaste for sensitive teeth. This is not the kind of thing that had been done in India before. You just had the basic toothpaste, maybe one flavor that emphasized gum health and one that emphasized whiteness. And then they had an older generation product called tooth powder, which you don't even see in this country. But they introduced the sensitive Pro Relief, and within 1 or 2 quarters, rose rapidly to have a 15% market share in the sensitivity market. Such rapid success is possible in India, partly because the consumers are responsive and partly because foreign brands are very sophisticated about being able to play and respond to Indian needs and be present in Indian media. So this is something to keep in mind, that quick success is possible if you know what you're doing. Let's talk about the 4 Ps. I'm going to start with product, and here is an example of a company that hired us because they had been in India for a while, like 33% of you on this webinar, but their sales had been limited. In fact, the head of international sales called me because he said that their predictions had not been met, and they were almost 72% below the projections for year 2, and he was quite worried that management was concerned that perhaps they had gone to India at the wrong time. So they asked us to do a quick diagnosis, and we looked at their pricing. It seemed to be appropriate for the Indian market. We looked at their distribution, and their initial step into India was very reserved and limited. So their sales projections had factored this already. So we didn't think that distribution was the bottleneck. They had a promotion plan that supported this limited distribution. Mostly in their particular case, it was point of sale advertising and some limited sampling, which is what we would have recommended. So we don't try to rock the boat and do things that that are unnecessary in India. We don't want the client to increase their risk. But we felt that perhaps the problem was that people weren't buying the product a second time. They were trying it either through the samples or through just looking at the product signage or finding it on the shelf or being recommended by the grocer. The many grocery stores in India are small, and the owner will make a personal recommendation to the customers that he or she knows well. But repeat purchases weren't happening. We had an inkling as to why this might be the case, but to verify our inkling, we actually ran a small number of focus group studies in multiple cities across India. And our inkling was definitely confirmed. People were quite comfortable with the price. They found the product to be attractive, but they didn't like the taste of the product. They didn't actually like one ingredient in the product. And we were able to isolate that very quickly because a similar product in a similar category was already popular in India. And the taste of this one seemed like it was different in a not very positive way. I can't tell you exactly what because of confidentiality reasons. But the nice thing was that the recommendation was simply to remove that ingredient. And this was not an inexpensive ingredient for the client. So removing that ingredient actually reduced the cost of the product by 6%. We recommended to our client that they maintain their price at what they had established because of the way pricing works in India. It's actually maximum price is printed on the carton and the bottles and so on. So we said leave the price alone. You actually get you get some flow through to gross margin, and let's see what happens to the sales. And certainly as they made this change and rolled it across India, they found that their sales spiked considerably, and they were able to come quite close to their projection for year 3. Here's another example. This company is not a client. Tupperware launched its products in India, and they realized very quickly that they needed to create products specific to India. So on the top left is a spice box. Many Indian women use a box for storing their spices, and typically the boxes have not been sealed very well. So you take out the spices and you put them in the spice box, and then after a few days they lose their aroma and pungency, and you've got to discard the spices and start over. And so their pitch in India was that we will give you an airtight spice box, and that worked very well for them. At the bottom right is an example of a small lunch box. Many Indian workers actually carry their lunch with them. So this is not meant for school children. This is actually meant for office workers and factory workers. And it makes, rather than carry product in a paper bag, most Indians prefer to use something that is usable. Often Indian foods have some degree of liquid, so having this compartment allows the gravy to be separated from the bread and so on, and this became a remarkable success in India as well. They have many other products, but we just want to highlight the ones that actually enabled Tupperware to introduce its brand into India in a way that they had product that was superior to what was available, and then it became easy for Indian housewives and homemakers to buy other products from this company as well. So my point to you with this whole idea about product is that be ready to tweak your products for success in India. Not everybody has to do it, but if you do it, you will find that your sales are substantially higher. We've got some other examples here, and again, I won't dwell into each of them. The bottom right, we are showing you this product called Kurkure, and this is actually sold by a PepsiCo subsidiary that you know well called Frito-Lay. Now they do sell the Lay chips and the Fritos and all of the products that we are familiar with in the US, but those don't account for the majority of Frito-Lay sales. They actually realized that the way to success in India ultimately was to create spicy snacks that were similar to what Indians already ate. And so they created this new brand just for India called Kurkure, which roughly translates into spicy, crunchy, something like that. And people often eat these kinds of snack foods at a tea break, somewhere between lunch and dinner. Sometimes they'll serve them for visitors who might come to your home as an appetizer kind of thing. So this has been tremendously successful. And if you travel to India, you will see these Kurkure bags hanging at grocery stores and convenience stores and little corner shops all over the country. It's been a remarkable success story. When Dunkin' Donuts went to India, they realized that Indians wouldn't be buying donuts by themselves alone, and they saw donuts and coffee, which is their offering in most of the U.S., wasn't going to be quite what Indians would want, and so they introduced their brand in India as Dunkin' Donuts and More. The and more includes things such as sandwiches and a whole host of products that their Indian partner has formulated and offers at their stores. So on and on, you see this theme that to get big success in India, you need to have the ability to tweak your product slightly. Sometimes you can make major tweaks like Kurkure, but other times the tweaks are fairly minor. Now let's talk about the second P here, promotion or advertising. There's quite a vibrant system in India around around media and advertising. And here I have a product that is really aimed at not the premium customer. This is actually a Dabur product. And you'll see that they're talking about a soap bar, which includes saffron and sandal, which are typically Indian ingredients. Saffron and sandalwood both have a distinct aroma. But what I wanted to point out to you is this is an ad meant for North India. And you see most of the text is in English, but they have some words in Hindi. There's Naya, which means new. And then here is a slogan, which says, Aisa glow soch mein dal de jo. Okay. The word glow is in English. The rest of it is Hindi. And what it's really saying is that your face will glow so that people will be intrigued. That's a rough translation. This is taken from one of their website listings, but similar ads appeared in print as well. And the point I wanted to make is you couldn't just take your standard US advertising and plant it in India. You've got to, in many cases, you have to tweak it to Indian needs. So the picture of the girl on the package may need to be appropriate. And often people think that India is a very conservative country. I'll show you then in the next ad that that's not necessarily the case. Even here, you see a lot more skin being shown than you might in a country such in an Islamic country, for example. Okay. There are India is truly a conservative country, but the filter of conservatism is different from what you might expect. And this next ad kind of illustrates that picture. I saw this ad for Kohinoor condoms in a family magazine. This is not from a men's or adult magazine or anything like that. It's very, very specific about the nature of the product. And I was struck. I actually made a presentation at a large American defense company, and I was talking about some of the advertising in India, and they had me censor this ad because they thought that some of their employees might be offended by the nature of this ad. Now, this is mainstream in India. It appeared, it didn't really create any sensation whatsoever in terms of controversy. First of all, in the U.S., we see that even today, condom advertising itself is considered, continues to be considered somewhat controversial. That's not the case in India. But more important, I wanted to illustrate the fact that poses like this are not don't really attract much attention, other than it being a successful ad. So my takeaway for advertising in India really is that you will find that it is of value to collaborate with Indian entities to be able to tailor your message. We at Amritt can do some of that, but if you're going to do a tremendous amount of work in that area, it will bring you somebody whose day-to-day job is converting foreign messages to Indian messages. The interesting thing in India is that all media is growing because of the rising literacy, because of rising urbanization and a large young population. People are reading more newspapers in India than they did before. The number of magazines in their circulation is growing rapidly. Television, in the old days, there was just one television channel run by the government, and today there are hundreds of channels, some of which are owned by foreign companies or partially owned by foreign companies, such as News Corp, such as MTV and Viacom have their channels in India. And then there are a number of Indian channels. News is restricted to Indian-owned companies, much like we have in the U.S. But entertainment is not limited in that manner. Radio has become quite big in India in recent years. Used to be only AM radio and only run by the government, but today they allow FM channels with entertainment and not news. And there's a tremendous amount of advertising success on those types of channels. Most of them, being FM stations, are local, but there are chains that offer a way to buy advertising across the country. The internet is growing. It's still fairly small compared to the rest of the world in terms of actual advertising. Much of the internet activity is on mobile. India went from 2 million cell phones to 900 million cell phones in the last 12 years, and mobile advertising is becoming an important force in India. Google is there, as well as many other Indian forces. Facebook gets a huge amount of its traffic from India, although not so much of its ad revenue yet. The standards for advertising in India are quite different. I referred to this earlier. When I came to the United States many years ago, I learned within the first 2 weeks that during a business conversation, you don't really talk about politics, and you don't really talk about religion. Well, those rules don't apply in India, and you will see very commonly that companies will refer to politics and to religion in their advertising. I have one example right here. And this is again our friends at Amul. I showed you the billboard with the Joe Biden ad in the beginning. Right after the elections in May, when the Bharatiya Janata Party was brought to power, their symbol is the lotus flower. Amul put up these ads across the country talking about the BJP's preference being their butter product. Of course, they're being tongue-in-cheek about it, but the idea of using an election symbol for one of the parties in their ads is not considered controversial or risky at all. It's not like the opposition party would be offended by this ad. They may have other ads at times that refer to other political parties. They've even had ads that refer to tragedies, and shortly after that, and they'll put up an ad that's because that's what's on people's minds, and those are more understated, but they will, I think they had an ad, after the, it was a major American celebrity that died, and they had an ad across the country mourning the death of that individual. The name is escaping me at this moment. Let's move on. Supriya, are there any questions?
Gunjan, we have just one question so far. Please, audience, we would like for you to send us more questions. Chris is asking if isn't India very similar to China as a market?
Yes, it's a great question, and somewhere along almost every webinar I give, I get asked this question because many American companies have had some success in China and then move on to India, because India began liberalizing about a decade after China. So people start, generally follow that progression. My short answer is no. There are some similarities. Both are countries across the Pacific Ocean from the US. Both have over 1 billion people. Both are relatively poor and emerging economies. But the similarities end there. And your success in India depends on understanding the differences between the two countries. Differences are many. India is a free country, but it has had a stock market since the 1800s. It is a democracy, and the people are not afraid to speak out. The accessibility of American culture and American brands is widespread, so it's not limited to the elite, and you can talk freely about it. So the attitudes towards America and towards Western culture are very different. This does not mean, however, that there isn't a distinct Indian culture. My friend who ran Levi's business in India put this very well. He said that young people in India have an Indian core with a thin coating of Western culture. So if you really want to understand them well, you can appeal to their thin coating of Western culture, but you've also got to crack that and appeal to their core Indian values to succeed. And the core Indian values are very different from Chinese values and from American values. So it's very important to understand that. Also, the distribution systems are different. India doesn't have the big box stores, the large grocery chains. The advertising standards in India are very different. I refer to, you can't put up an ad as a Chinese company or a foreign company that may appear to be even slightly critical of the Chinese government. That's not really so much of an issue in India. Companies can have fun with political messages in India. There are many, many differences, and I think it's important that you focus on India as a standalone country to be able to understand how to succeed. So Priya, you think we can try one more poll real quick?
Yes, sure, Gunjan. And then, folks, I need to run into another client meeting, but Gunjan will continue with the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and run a poll. Please answer as soon as possible. And again, thank you for that question, Chris. And folks, please continue to send us your questions so that Gunjan can take them.
Okay, so we see again that we've got a roughly 2/3, 1/3 split. Most people are still thinking about finding the right partners and distributors. And so we'll talk about that next, actually. And then some people are concerned about charging the right price for their product. Can you go ahead and close that screen? Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about distribution. Here's a picture again from our client Paramount Farms. On the right is what you might see in the US as well. You know, they have a display inside a modern Indian grocery store where they are sampling their pistachio product. And they placed one of their own, one of the promotion companies that we hired for them to actually offer the product sample. And you'll see the emphasis on 100% California and the total natural guilt-free snack and so on. So a lot of product is sold there. However, 90% of the sales of this product line happen in small, tiny stores that may be a few hundred square feet that look very similar to the one on the left here. Okay? And this store is one where the owner may be the guy at the counter, and his family may be running around stocking the shelves and so on. And you'll see that he's got the Cadbury chocolates here. He's got the Paramount product here, and then some of the lesser known brands are stocked behind him. Most of the sales for consumer packaged goods products happen at stores like this. This one is considered a Class A store in the city of Delhi, and there are hundreds, if not thousands of them across Delhi. There are B and C class stores where foreign product may not be as well accepted because they cater to a different demographic. But these are the kinds of stores where your product will be sold. And significant success in India includes a strategy that covers both traditional and modern retail, as they call it in India. As product is being moved from point A to point B, you will see that novel methods of transportation are used. Now you might see the Pepsi truck here and say, hey, that doesn't look too different from what I might see in a small US town. But I want you to focus on this little cycle rickshaw here. He's also transporting product to some of the same stores, and this is a picture taken in a major Indian city. Okay. This picture here is in Chennai, and this is how eggs are delivered to these thousands of stores across the country. And in fact, India has a unique offering with the Golden Arches, where they take these scooters, remove the back seat, and install a delivery carrier, and so you can order your chicken, your chicken sandwich or your French fries and whatever, and they will deliver them to your home. India has no Big Macs because the restaurant does not serve beef in India. But they're remarkably successful with this delivery pattern. You can order online or by fax or by phone, and a few minutes later, a guy shows up at your door in your office or your home. So keep in mind that distribution is quite different in India. I have an example here of Pepsi with their success across the country. And these are pictures taken from smaller towns where there are little stores selling what they call cold drinks in India, and perhaps a few knickknacks. Some of the knickknacks you see here might be the kurkure snacks, and you'll see some of the cold drinks shown up here. Pepsi has been extremely successful in distributing directly to all towns that have over 5,000 people, and then using third-party distributors for the rest of the country. Often they need to set up a mechanism for disposal of the used bottles. There are many reasons to do that. Some of it is for recycling, some of it is to prevent unauthorized people from taking the bottles and filling other product in it. There's a whole ecosystem that you need to understand to be successful in a big way. Here's another example for distribution. Amway today sells almost $500 million of product in India, and they offer quite a wide range, over 100 products, 150 products almost. When they went to India, they realized that mail order shipping is not the way to go, and so they actually have locations where the customer can come in and pick up the product. They've got large warehouses in the major cities, and then today almost 80 warehouses across the country where product is available for the Amway employees to pick up, or the Amway independent business people, I guess, and also for customers to pick up. Based on their success in India, they have a plan to expand production by investing in their own factories in India. So far, they've been getting product either from overseas or manufacturing under contract, and they think that they'll cross $1 billion in sales. They've had some recent difficulty this year, but I think that's just a passing phase, and I think you will find them staying on track over the next few years. Let's switch to pricing, which is the other problem that many of you on this webinar have expressed. So the short point that I want to make about pricing is that there is a market in India with 1.2 billion people for any product at any price. The most expensive products in India, the top luxury cars, the most expensive perfumes and skincare products are being sold in India. But if you're looking at volumes, you're looking at high revenues, then you need to play at various price points. Here's an example of Procter & Gamble, which really is not a huge player in India yet. They've had some success, but certainly much smaller than Unilever and many Indian players. So they operate in a number of categories: baby care, oral care, hair care, and of course the laundry detergent. The Gillette business in India is actually run separately. Now when A.G. Lafley came back and became the CEO for his second run, he confirmed the plan that Bob McDonald had set up for India to continue investments there. They have a whole range of products they offer in India, some of which may seem a little unusual. So for example, when they went with toothpaste in India, they rode on the Oral-B brand rather than Crest. They announced that product last year, and early signs are that it had some good success. When you look at hair care, they're selling most of their shampoos in these single-use sachet packs. They have Pantene, but they also offer Head and Shoulders and other products. When you look at laundry detergent, they offer not just Tide, but they also offer Ariel, and they offer it in these not the cartons that you and the liquid bottles that you see here in the U.S., but they're really offered in plastic bags, if you will, again to reduce the cost of packaging and to be able to make it more attractive for Indian consumers. Many Indian consumers don't want to buy a large amount of laundry detergent, so the packages sold in India are fairly small. Even the larger packets are smaller than some of our regular packages that you might find at a Walmart or Costco store here. So they've adapted their ticket price. They've also reformulated some product to be able to meet Indian needs and Indian price points. And they found much greater success when they reduced prices. Okay, so that concludes our 4 P's of marketing. I do have a few minutes, I think, to be able to talk about R&D collaboration. I will cover that very briefly. So many Western consumer product companies are leveraging Indian scientists and engineers, and you can do this through captive R&D centers where you have your own engineers or scientists working in India. You can do this through an outsourced partner, or you can do this through a JV or a supplier contract. Again, since not many people have asked questions about this, I'm going to gloss over this section. We do a lot of work with our consumer product clients in being able to leverage Indian engineers and scientists to be able to accelerate the innovations and to be able to bring out more products for Western markets as well as for global markets. Here was an example of frugal innovation and how it improved sales. We looked at one of our premium brand clients in the US, and we brought to them ideas that were successful in India, offered largely by Indian companies, but some by Western companies. Took 11 ideas from there and said some of these may make sense in the US or in their Latin American and other emerging markets. And they went with 3 of those 11 ideas to take them to market. 2 of them were implemented by their R&D team and by the business unit. And then 1 idea was considered a little too far out for North America and was handed over to their emerging markets team, which is run out of out of an office that's not located in North America, and they're testing that idea in some emerging countries. I'm going to skip over some of these as well. So this is just a representation of what happens when you have a captive R&D center. You can get much more savings in the long run, but it takes a while to get there. If you have a third-party relationship with an engineering service provider or a technical developer in India, you can get the savings fairly quickly, but the leverage that you achieve is a little bit smaller. So there's a place for both of those options, and then often for our clients, we are able to find other solutions in the middle, depending on the needs of the client and our expertise on enabling these kinds of relationships. So we are now at the end of our 1 hour, and so I'm going to just go over very briefly. I'll just talk about sourcing. Most consumer product companies used to think that you can't really bring consumer products manufactured in India all the way to other markets. But now we are finding that that's not necessarily the case. The relative value of transportation, the efficiency of Indian production, many factors have led to an opportunity that you can actually source from India, not only for the Indian market, but also for regional and sometimes American market. So something to keep in mind. And let me conclude by saying that if you have enjoyed this webinar, we are happy to send you our report on making a splash in India's consumer market. We normally sell that for $195 for people who attended this live seminar. We can offer that to you at no charge. If you have questions that you think about after the conclusion of this webinar, please feel free to email us at usa@amritt.com, and we can answer them on a one-on-one basis. Some of us do travel across the country and may have an opportunity to meet you in case you have more detailed questions or something that you would like us to look at more carefully. Let me see if other questions have come up. Ask us if they are left. Like we've taken care of the questions. So I encourage you at this point, as you exit the webinar, you will be presented with the opportunity to take a 30-second survey telling us how you felt about this webinar. And I encourage you to express your specific ideas, because we take those into account as we offer future webinars and other materials of value to the audience. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed this session, and I look forward to talking to you further by email. Bye now.